Okay, so good afternoon. I'm Hank Levin. I'm your host, and um, everybody here is uh, assumed to be a part of the Facebook portal group. George called in earlier. He's one of the people that doesn't relate well to Facebook, and we do have a number of people who feel this way. Uh, or for one reason or another. But um, I was most of you probably know I was the editor of the Free Spirit Journal for how long was it? 13 years, 15 years?
Something like that.
Yeah, since about the mid 70s, I think. And that went on for a number of years until I tried to hand it off to Alan Walter, and
I think you started in '87, Hank, and then went to 2000.
Yeah, that could be. I don't remember the dates in my head without looking it up, but thank you. Sounds right. Anyhow, it kind of ceased publication under Walters and his henchman Joel. I forgot Joel's last name. And then after a few years, I didn't want to take it up again as a print publication because I wanted to work on my own books. And so more recently, we have made a few attempts to revive it on Facebook. And I didn't know quite what I was doing, and I still don't on Facebook. So I finally, this is our latest attempt, and we've started a Facebook a page, a Free Spirit Journal page, and a Free Spirit Journal group that we call the Community Portal. And these events are under the auspices of the Community Portal. So my specialty has been biofeedback guided personal consultations. I designed a number of different meters, and I wrote a book called Clearing, a Guide for Professionals, that has my own techniques that I use. And I also like to support other people's techniques. I work with people that do EFT and work with a number of the other clearing providers, which we might go into later. So that's who I am. I just like to go around the circle and just a couple of brief words and your location for each person. David, could you tell us about yourself?
First of all, my location is Cambridge, Ontario, is near Toronto.
Mm-hmm.
And I learned about Dynetics in Easter '97, and then I learned by a long story of a serendipitous event. I was on a business trip. Well, I got declared real quick. I got declared like bang before so fast.
Now
Anyways,
this is going to be a short.
Yeah, Frank. Yeah. Anyways, I didn't know what I was gonna do. Then I landed up in San Antonio and at a business event conference, and I met up with a guy who we started talking, and we were in the same wavelength. And I told him what happened. He said, "Well, do you know about the Free Zone and the Free Spirit Journal?"
Wow. What a nice memory.
That's a long story short. So
Yeah.
then I could write a book on that, the part that I missed. Anyways, and then that was my savior, that Free Spirit Journal, and I just about ate the thing, and all those articles, that was my bridge. And then I asked Hank for all the back copies, so I got almost all of them except for one or two, and I took all the tech articles, and I got myself 2 large binders of tech articles from the Free Freesphere Journal, and I still use them now.
Fantastic.
So,
Let's see, who else? Do we have another Yes. Yeah, we have
Tom Tibbetts.
oh, Tom. Yes, Tom. And another. Tom,
Let's see.
are
Yeah,
you?
I got. I live in just north of Dallas, Texas. I got in Scientology in 1975, Gino and Lavelle, and they got out of it in '81.
Yeah, of independent Scientologists who.
That's when.
Okay, there was another person. Tom, give me.
Oh, go ahead.
I'm pretty much done.
You're in Texas.
Yeah. Tom and I have been working together for quite a while, and we've had some interesting experiences. Just 2 weeks ago, on the discussion, we had a fascinating telepathic demonstration. So anyhow, there was Steve. What was his name? I had another person.
Are you looking for me?
Yes, yes.
It's Paul Susanbach.
Paul, yeah, I went blank on your name, and you don't seem to be appearing at all on the list.
Well, I'm seeing you on my computer, but my camera's not working. It looks like David Pelly's camera also is very blurry.
Yes.
Like it's out of.
Well, that's David. Actually, the camera's fine. David is blurry. So
blurry. I got it.
That's from Heavy Case.
Yeah.
Well, then he's doing fine.
Yeah. Well, you can. I'm sorry that I don't see you. I should see you.
My camera is on the fritz. Evidently, the light is on, but the camera's not working.
Even so, I should see something. Gail is also camera not working, and she seems to be trying to make contact.
Yeah.
But anyhow, so could you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself and where you are?
All right. I'm in Brunswick, Georgia. I'm actually at Glencoe, but in Brunswick, Georgia, right on the coast, just above Jacksonville. And my clients are normally from the Brunswick Judicial Circuit, the Atlantic Judicial Circuit, or the Waycross Judicial Circuit. So that's about 15 counties that I serve for the courts.
Wow.
And then I do trauma work also. So it's family violence, anger management, and trauma work.
Oh.
Oh, fantastic.
What's your name?
Paul Susanbach.
And do you do any of this stuff? I forget the word that for the courts.
Yes, right.
Any of the therapy, like are you a
usually it's trauma reduction, and then I return them back to their primary therapist, their LCSW they're working with, or if a social worker for the court system. So I'll do the trauma reduction and then put them right back to their direction they're going in.
I see. And are you considered an expert witness in court?
I try to stay away from it. I got to do that again next week. I try to stay away from that.
Yeah. I do too.
They're very painful.
Yeah, they have their own set of rules, and
yes, they do.
In a nutshell, in order to prevail in a legal situation, you have to prove that you're a victim. In order to actually help the person, you have to convince them that they are not a victim. And so those two things are contradictory.
Completely compete.
Yeah.
That's insane.
Yeah. Yes. And that's why I do my best to stay away from it. I didn't like it when I was in D.C. at Federal District Court, and I don't like it down here either. But it happens. They subpoena you, and you got to go.
Yeah. I hear that. Well, thanks for being there. and I'd sure like to understand this platform a little better, so I know where people are coming from, literally. But anyhow, thanks for that. Let
Well,
me
it's
ask. Yes,
asking
go
you
ahead.
because I've been using your stuff for years and years and years.
Oh, thank you. You mean from the clearing guide?
Yes, yes.
Oh, excellent. Yeah, that was going to be another question. I wanted to ask people, could everybody type into the chat window what platform they use when they work over the internet? So
Yeah, some people do it.
Norma's platform is telepathic. I think what I mean is technical platform. I mean, you call them on the phone, or you just nothing. You just just do it.
Well, I
Do it.
consider mine a technology.
You what? Say it again.
I said I can consider mine a technology.
Okay. Yeah. But how do they make? How do you confer with them during the process?
Yes.
Okay. What? How do you confer with them?
Oh, then I confer over the phone.
Okay. Thank you. So
Okay,
that
good.
would be fun. Thank you. Anybody else? We've only got a couple of answers here. Um, move this along. Okay. Um, well, anyhow, so this is supposed to be about uh, what platform we're using. We only have a few answers there. I wonder. I wonder.
Hank,
Yes.
when I spoke to Mike,
Yeah.
he used Skype,
Mm-hmm.
and he used Skype way back over 15 years ago when I had processing with him, and he uses Skype today. And one interesting point is he blanks out his image. He just looks at the image of the client and and the audio is two-way, but he does not have the client look at his ugly puss.
I see. Is there a reason for that?
Yeah, he felt it was distracting.
Okay. Well, that may be well, and it may be true for him. I'm not sure. For me,
He's just as bad looking as I am.
the ideal scenario is to have the person right here, right in front of me, and then of course they can see me, and I can see them. So as close as we can get to that, the happier I am. But I can understand why somebody would choose. Some people just want to see the meter; they don't want to see the client. I like to see all three. You know, I
Well, he commented to me he does, one, not use a meter.
yeah,
Two, he audits people from all over the world where traveling to Colorado would be difficult for them.
of course.
Thirdly, that sometimes when they're finished with a session, or a series of sessions, I should say, an intensive,
Hmm.
uh, they go back to their home and there's something that came up that they forgot to originate when they were in Colorado.
Yeah, it's because
And
they're
so
alive.
he says he does a majority of his work now online.
Yeah. There's another good reason for doing sessions over the internet remotely, and that is uh, one of the issues that we need to be careful of is something called overrun, where you're doing the right thing, but you do it for too long, and the person hits a high point, and you keep on going, and they start to get lower and lower and lower, and start to feel invalidated, and basically, by the time we're done, they're not so happy with the session. That's an overrun, and it's a big subject, and I like to do a whole discussion on that. But when a person comes from a great distance and they've got a hotel room, they've got an enormous amount of expense, and when you're doing a session, sometimes you will achieve at least an endpoint in 45 minutes or an hour and a half. You come to a flat spot, or they have a major realization, and the correct thing to do then is to stop the session and send them home, or give them something to do or something to study. But you need to stop the session so you don't overdo it, you don't overrun. And to know when to do that is a fine touch. Uh, and you're less likely to do that, to end the session and tell the person to come back tomorrow if they're paying to sit there in front of you. They're paying large amounts of money, so you want to keep going. Maybe take a short break and continue. Sometimes that's not appropriate. But when the person is online, you can tell them this seems to be a good ending off place. You know, when can we get together again? Tomorrow? And you avoid the risk of overruns. One of the advantages of working over the internet. So we have a number of people here that have used different technologies. I don't know how many people here are using Hubbard's technology directly, because according to that culture, if Hubbard did not, quote, invent it, it's not valid. And these people believe that Hubbard actually invented the meter, which he didn't. But this is part of the culture, and so they're on the bridge. And you have a lot of people who feel that they're on the bridge, and they get sessions over the internet. There is what's his name? Spiritual rescue technology from David Lawrence. He used to work with meters. A number of people don't like meters, and I'll say something about that in a minute. There's some people that work with Ron Zorg stuff, you know, Bill Robertson. Roger, who is supposed to be here but isn't here, of course. He worked with Alan Walter's stuff. And George, you worked with John Galusha's stuff and Mike Goldstein, Identics.
And I know Roger, and I know all these other people.
Oh,
for
yeah.
some reason, I seem to, not quite as much as Mike Goldstein, but I tend to have been around.
Yeah, well, that's good. And of course, I don't know if anybody here is, well, you worked with Pete, with Zivorod Slavinsky's stuff.
Yeah, I've met Zivorod. I've had a lot of conversations with him. I used Karen Gould down in Cleburne, Texas. I think she's a really good practitioner for Pete. And I've had some of the early rundowns, space rundown and time rundown. And
thank you. And then there's Peter Shepard.
yeah, I've heard of him, yeah.
Peter
I've
Shepard.
spoken to him once, but that was it.
And then at least somebody here has worked with my book, you know, Clearing Guide. Paul has worked with the Clearing Guide. I don't know who's familiar with it. It's a lot of people feel it's a definitive work on clearing.
I don't know. People, there's that Clearbird and Hedron Beer, and then when I finally saw their stuff, they'd borrowed some of it from my ideas from 2003, 2004, and I borrowed it from somebody else, you know, and they had, but I had talked to the fellow, and then roundabout they said they discovered it at the same time they talked to me. So
well, everybody borrows.
People borrow.
People borrow, and
Dianetics.
When I teach people, I try to tell them to, when they're sharing it, you be the source of it. You don't have to tell anybody you got this from Hank Levin. That's an academic thing. They like to feel they're talking to the source. This is my own thing. So there are people that have a lot of ego connected to what they're teaching, and they want to be credited for it.
Yeah.
And I don't believe in that. If I have taught you a certain paradigm, you go out and teach it. Of course, you can. If they ask you where did you get this, you can tell them. But I'm not saying I want you to name me and give me a 10% commission, stuff like this. This is this lessens your credibility, and it's fine to just you be the source of what you've learned. This is a little piece of my philosophy. So, Clearing, a Guide for Professionals. It was written primarily for people who are professional wellness practitioners, so they can incorporate it into their work, or people who want to do this for a living. But when I have a client, I ask them to buy the book, and I assign homework out of it because there's some ideas that I really don't want to sit there and explain in person at the person's expense. So anyhow, there are all these different techniques that can be used on the internet. A quick comment about meters. A lot of people, Peter Gelfand is another one, and of course David. A lot of people feel that they've been doing this for so long they don't need a meter anymore because they're telepathic. Yeah, I like to have a meter because the client is probably not that telepathic, and it gives them an objective reference. So if I see that their needle is floating telepathically, and I tell them, that just becomes an evaluation. If they see the meter, you see, that's useful. If I ask if there's a withhold, or something that you would feel embarrassed telling me about, there's sometimes you have to do that, and they say no, and of course it's reading like hell. And you turn the meter around and show them, look, when I ask you if there's a withhold, you see that big read? You see that? If you spot what it is, it'll read again as you're telling me. Okay? And that puts it in their court. I'm not sitting there accusing them of having a withhold. Whether they have or not, and I'm telling them they have, that's an evaluation. And Hubbard used to do this too, but it never ended up on the bridge. I can tell you where you can read about it. If you remember those little handbooks that he wrote, I think in Phoenix, that were green and yellow covers. I think
Professional series?
Professional Series number 22.
Okay.
He talks about showing the person the meter to get them on board. And I did that before I discovered that book. But the book kind of, was interesting. Oh, Hubbard did this too. But it never made it onto the, onto the so-called bridge. Anyhow, to me, does anybody here fly? No? Okay.
You mean as a pilot or as a passenger?
As a pilot.
No.
Okay, well, you've got certain instruments that are crucial, like an airspeed indicator, for instance. You got to know how fast you're going, because if you go too slow in a turn or something, you lose control of the plane. It'll fall down. So, or a compass. You need a gyro compass because it helps you to tell what direction you're going. Now, you don't need these things to fly. The plane will fly without them. And if you have enough experience, you can usually guess correctly. But you'd be an idiot to take a cross-country trip or try to fly at night without those instruments. I mean, they don't cost that much. So why don't you use them? Why would you go and make a habit of flying without the instruments? Why? Some people don't like it because they're uncomfortable with technology. They use a cell phone, but they think a meter is too complicated. Really, you can just have the meter hooked up and not even refer to it consciously, but you'll see sometimes when you're making a mistake. If you're going on too long or trying to get a person to do something they're not about to do, the needle goes in what direction? Tom? Tom?
What's that?
Where were you? I said the needle will, if you're asking a person a question, they can't get the answer to it, and you keep asking, what does the needle do?
Oh, what does it do?
Yeah.
Yeah, it moves.
That's right. Which direction?
I'll guess down. It'll hit the bottom right side.
No.
No?
No. When they find the answer, or if they at least have it consciously without telling you, but they know the answer, it will move to the right. That's called a fall.
Yeah.
Oh, I always called it the up. Sorry.
If you're asking them something that they either don't know or don't want to know, but they actually don't see it. They don't see it. It's suppressed. Needle move up. Rising needle indicates incoming charge, the buildup of pictures with negative mental energy. And the resistance in the body gets greater. And what it indicates is resistance to a thought. You will have people who are sitting there with somebody talking to them that only they can hear. Okay? They're sitting in front of you and somebody's talking to them, whispering in their ear, and you say, you ever feel like somebody's talking to you? And if it's something that really frightens them, the needle will go up. It'll rise and rise and rise and rise. Okay? When they finally become brave enough to see it and they say, well, yeah, sometimes I hear a voice talking to me, you'll see a big fall. It indicates a release of energy. Now, there are people that find this complicated. I never did. I was always comfortable with it. In fact, the first contact I ever had with Scientology was in Gene Hobel's office.
Who's?
Gene Hobel. He was a teacher and an auditor in New York City. He was a very funny guy, a very good speaker, and he was my first contact. And I looked around the room, and the people were kind of weird, most of them. I mean, Gene was amazing. He was kind of a Robin Williams type character. He could change personalities. I admired that. But a lot of the people there were kind of true believers, and I wasn't comfortable with them. But I looked at that meter, and I thought, I don't know if I'm ever going to be able to get along with these people, but I want that meter. And eventually I ended up building them. So people who say that it's too complicated or I don't need it, I have a bit of a contention with them, but we have a friendly disagreement with that.
Hank?
Yes.
I don't have a meter. I don't have never taken a meter course, but I've heard about meters for 20 years. If I was going to buy a meter, would you recommend a meter like the boxes, or a computer meter?
I like the computer meter.
Yeah.
There are advantages to the old analog meters, but computer meter, you can do what we're talking about here. You can use it over the internet.
Oh, what about the InterTrack?
The InterTrack is another kind of a meter that, that does not hook up with the internet. You would have to use.
Oh, right.
Yeah, you would have to have a camera on it. The InterTrack is a meter that was actually designed for people who did the EFT, and for people who got too confused about the needle. Some people. I've known people that have worked with a meter for years, not professionally, but they've had their noses rubbed in it, right? They've known about it for years, and they cannot tell the difference between the needle falling to the right and rising to the left, even though it says right on the dial, rise to the left, fall to the right, and they're confused about it in workshops.
That's extreme dyslexia.
I would think so, but it's very common, and they'll ask me questions like, well, can't you design the meter with a switch so that it falls to the left and rises to the right? And the answer is yes, of course you could. And what problem would that solve? Your dyslexia?
No. Hank, I'll give you, I come to an intersection if I'm driving on a bad day, I won't know which way to turn, right or left. I'll stand there stunned.
Uh-huh. Well, that's if you don't know which way to turn, standing there might not be that such a bad idea until you figure it out. Anyhow, the InterTrack, I think we eventually we can do a little demonstration on the InterTrack, but I think it would take too much time right now. But thanks for mentioning it, Norma. It's, there are people that use it a lot in Europe for EFT. People can pick it up. It works with colored lights. So one set of lights represents a fall, or small fall, a long fall. There's a light that represents a rise, or equivalent to a rise. There's even a light that shows a dirty needle, which indicates anger or upset. And there's a light that indicates a release, like a floating needle. So it's very useful for psychologists and for people that that are not comfortable with a meter dial. Anyhow, there are a lot of different platforms, and I'm going to start out by recommending Zoom, and I'll let you know why. Zoom has a very fast video. Is there, David, is there something that's not understood, or are we on a wrong track for you?
Hank. No,
Yeah.
I'm tired.
Okay.
I got narcolepsy.
Oh my God. Okay. Well, we could handle that in session.
Yep.
Yeah. And if you want to talk to me about it, really, we could. So that's okay. I just wanted to make sure it wasn't getting past us here. You know, when you're using a meter, there's something called an instant read that's very, very important. Oops, give me a second here. Yeah, there's something called an instant read. You ask a question and say it reads as a result of your question. If it doesn't read for a second or two, that means it's reading on a thought that the person had subsequent to your asking the question. It might be relevant, it might not even be relevant to the question. But if it reads instantly right at the end of the sentence, before the person has had a chance to think about it. We just needed you. If it reads before the person has had a chance to think about it, that indicates that there's charge on that question. You see, you don't know exactly the significance of the read, but you know there's charge on that question. So the instantaneity of the read is very important. So if you're working with a meter and you ask a question and you don't see the meter read for a second and a half, well, if the meter's on the desk right in front of you and the client is right in front of you, you know that you've got an instant read. If the client is halfway around the world in Australia, you don't know if that's an instant read unless you check check the speed and the matchup of the audio and the visual. And there's a way to do that. I'll show you. Let's see. I think I'm going to use Tom. Is your meter on the screen?
Yeah, I got it pulled up. I don't know how. Do we have to do a share or?
Yes, you'll have to share, just like you do when we're in the session.
Okay, share desktop.
Wow, gosh and Begor. Okay, does everyone see that meter?
Yeah.
Okay. Tom, would you do me a favor and hook yourself up to the meter?
All right, I'm hooked up.
Okay. Now I'm not taking control of the meter. Another nice thing about Zoom is that I can actually take control of the meter. In fact, what I'll do, I'm going to ask you for remote control.
Right.
Okay. You notice I don't mind if the client sees the meter. I know in the culture of the big S, the meter is totally secret and the person's never supposed to see it, which I think is BS. Like I pointed out, Hubbard even would show it to people. But I don't know. I guess people feel it gives them authority or altitude or something. They have a meter shield. They even have a wooden screen that keeps the person from accidentally seeing the meter. My feeling is, after 50 years of this work, my client needs it more than I do. So,
Well, the reason that the church says that, I mean, they say it's distracting or takes their attention away from their case and onto the meter.
yeah, I understand that. It takes their attention away from it. What is the meter showing? It's showing their case. How can it be taking the attention away from the case? And besides, what you're talking about is going out of session. You know, that means you should not have any pictures on the wall or windows or anything else. You know, why? How can this? How can it be taking
Yeah, that's true.
attention?
It,
You're
it might
asking,
it might do for like a couple minutes till a
not,
person gets,
oh, not even for a couple of minutes. If the person's distracted by the meter,
yeah.
you ask them, what is your attention on? They say, on the meter. They say, well, you can keep your attention on the meter and listen to the question too, can't you? Right? It's like you're driving a car. Can you look out the window and look at the speedometer at the same time? Why not? I mean,
Yeah.
do you have to stare at the speedometer till you crash the car? It's ridiculous.
That's good logic. That's for sure.
Yeah. Okay, so we got a nice loose needle here. And by the way, something that you can see on this meter, let's turn the sensitivity down a bit. Did I receive? Oh, okay, I did. See, it's a little delay on that adjustment. So you notice that the needle is going back and forth. It's almost a floating needle there. You can tell when the needle's floating, if you know what a floating needle looks like, as it rises and falls with a rhythm. It's actually a sinusoid movement, and you can see that sinusoid movement here in this graph. So here it's rising, 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 the fall. When it starts to look like a sinus wave, that's a floating needle. There's a tiny float there, you know. Poor Tom is waiting for me to find out what the hell I'm going to do, and so a little attention there, isn't there? Now,
Yeah,
before we do anything, I'm going to lower the sensitivity a little bit more because we're all over the place, which is actually good. But we want to keep it on the dial for this demonstration. George, are you on board here? Hey, George.
He's left for a second.
Well, I know. Okay, well, we got to keep going.
I want to ask a question.
Yes, go ahead.
What's that little knob on the left top side? What's that? Tone.
This here, sensitivity?
No. On a box meter, like the Mark V or whatever. But
Well, it's different.
What is that knob called?
Which knob?
1 to 5 on a or something like that, or 8 on a
Well,
meter?
on the left, that's a clock. Then
No, not clock. I know what a clock is. Oh God.
talking about the range dial.
No.
Okay, which side is it on? Left or
On the left side.
okay, is it top or bottom?
On the top, I think, usually.
okay, what you're seeing is there are 4 boxes. One has the time. of day. The other box has the range. It's like the TA. This,
EA, don't I? That's
yeah, this box has the previous range. So you get a sense of if there's a blowdown, where it blew down from. And this is like a tone arm counter on the right. Okay,
so. And how? What does that? How does that read? What does it say? What does it mean?
the tone arm counter.
Yeah.
The tone arm counter indicates the accumulation of downward motions. And the idea is, as the person cognites on something or brings it to consciousness, you will get a downward motion. You'll get a fall. And the more falls, the more beneficial the session.
Oh, I
So
see.
they actually add them up here. Any fall that's greater than 2/10 of a division.
Oh.
You see? So in an hour, it's nice to know that you're getting maybe more than 10 divisions. If you're getting one division in an hour, it means your session's not impinging. It's like you're not dealing with anything.
Not getting any traction.
Yeah, got it? Okay. So George is back. Okay, here's what I do to check the delay. So Tom, I want you to simultaneously say now and squeeze the cans exactly when you do that.
Now.
Okay. And one more time. Well, let the needle settle down again.
Now.
Very good. What did you observe, George, in the delay?
There was a delay, and that's a technical problem with meters on the internet. I would hate to do listening and nulling on the internet.
Yeah, there was about a half a second.
About that, yeah.
Okay. If you know that you've got a half a second delay, it's annoying, but you can still do a session. Very often, there's no delay, especially if you don't have a whole bunch of stuff hooked up. And
It's my new computer too.
What some people have done is they've had the client holding the meter, right, and it's facing you, so I don't know how to get these seconds out, and that's one of the reasons why I don't use a meter, why Identics doesn't use a meter.
Well, listen carefully. A half a second you can accommodate. Okay, you just know there's a half a second. There's some things that it's a loss of accuracy, but you can work with it. A second and a half, you can still work with it, but not for listing and knowing.
Obviously not, no.
Yeah, but you can still see if there was charge on a question.
That looks a little dirty right there.
If you ask
that's dirty, right?
If you ask a person a question, and a second and a half later you get a blowdown, and you know there's a second and a half delay, you know that there's charge on that question. You can continue to do the session. Again, I don't do a lot of listening and knowing, but I do like speed. Different platforms have different speeds, and there are a number of platforms that people can use besides Zoom. Of course, Skype. Skype is a little bit slower than Zoom usually. Sometimes they are perfect. They're exactly the same, and often there's no delay. I have used WebEx, which I'll talk to you about in a moment. There are other ones called Log Me In, GoToMeeting, Join Me, Ring Central. Google Hangouts I've never used, so I don't know what kind of delay there is. And then TeamViewer is one of the earliest ones I was shown by somebody that does a lot of tech support, and he loves it. The problem with most of these is if there is video, it's very slow. You want a video system that will convey, I think it's 29 or 30 frames per second. If you can't get 29 or 30 frames per second, you can use it for doing tech support and things like that, but you're not going to see instant reads. And also, as the person's talking, their mouth won't be in sync with what they're saying, which is very annoying.
Very annoying.
Then I want to interrupt here, if you don't mind. I have no experience with listing and nulling. I've never had a session on that, and I'm very interested in it. And it caught my attention when George mentioned it, why he would not use them do listing and nulling on the internet. Can you explain, a full explanation of what's going on, please?
Okay, listing and nulling means that, well, there are two different things. One is working from a list, which is you have a list of questions. You ask a question and you look for an instant read or a delayed read. What you're really looking for is a delayed read.
Like have you been invalidated?
Yeah. Have you been invalidated? Have you been suppressed? Have you been this? Have you been that? Have you been bad? Have you been? And you look to see if there's an instant read at the end of the sentence. And the other thing is listing means you ask the person to write down a list of things that might be. Okay, so you can't seem to hold a job. Tell me briefly why you think you can't hold a job. And they give you a short sentence. And okay, is there any other reason you can't hold a job? They give you another sentence. And tell me all the reasons you think you can't hold a job. They get 5 or 6 reasons, blah, blah, blah. My parents, my school, my this, my that, and everybody's blaming. And so now you have a list of answers, of whys. And you say, okay, I'm going to assess this list. And you read them back to the person, and you note the read that occurs for each one. Okay. So that's listing and nulling. So instant reads are important for that. Now, each session can be different. Mostly when Tom and I work together, there's almost no delay at all. But you check. If it's going to be important to you, you check. And if it's a second and a half, that means you've got a really bad internet connection. You can still use the meter, but not for instant reads. You can use it to see if there's a discharge. You can use it to see, you ask a question and you get the slow rise. And then there's no instant slow rise. You just get a slow rise. Well, you know that your question is bringing in some kind of negative energy. And the meter is very useful for that. A half a second, like I said, doesn't bother me. You can accommodate that. It's like driving a car and the brakes are not instantaneous. You need to give yourself a second or half a second to.
Yeah. Okay.
So it's a lot better than having the person drop everything and fly down to your office and look for a hotel room. This is the difference. So the test that I just showed you is very useful. Squeeze the can simultaneously with saying now, and they do that, and just for fun, Tom.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's do it. Let's do that again. One more time.
Now you mean?
Yeah. Let the needle settle down for a moment.
Now.
It's still about a half a second. Maybe not quite a half a second.
I'm thinking a quarter of a second.
Yeah, more like a quarter of a second. Yeah.
Instantaneous to me.
Yeah. If you work a lot with cameras, and you take time shots and stuff like that, you get an idea of what a half a second is and what a quarter of a second is, because you hear the two clicks, and that's kind of a quarter of a second. Okay, so that's the thing about Zoom. The other thing about using Zoom, besides they have very fast video with very little delay, and I think they use less bandwidth. They make less demand on your computer connection. They have great tech support. You'll get somebody in this country who speaks English, and they're relatively inexpensive for what you're trying to do, especially if all you do is one-on-one stuff. They even have a free account. So
Do what?
they have free account.
Oh,
Or it's nominal, very small amount. You can't do what I'm doing here. For that, you have to pay some money, but it's not that much money. And if you're getting paid to do a session, you just do that. You also have very effective remote control. Okay, WebEx. I used to use WebEx. They have lousy tech support in English. You're talking to somebody in Chennai, South India, and who speaks, they call it Bombay Welsh, and it can be very, very frustrating. You often can't tell what they're saying. They don't understand what you're saying. It takes forever, and you have to call them back, and sometimes you have to call them back and ask to speak to somebody else. It's not fun certainly during a session. They're overseas. Now, Skype is very user-friendly. It's universal. I don't know if they have a remote control utility. Does anybody know if Skype has remote control?
what is that? What do you mean?
That means you can the client can give control of his computer and the meter.
Oh yeah.
To the
Oh yeah.
practitioner.
Yes. Yeah.
They have that. Okay. When I was using it, they didn't have that, but I understand they've changed that. It's usually a little bit slower than Zoom. It might be useful to have it because everybody uses it, you know. I think there's something else called what is that thing that's on your phone, Norma? Do you know what we sometimes when we call Hamda?
Oh, FaceTime?
FaceTime, yeah. Theoretically, you should be able to use that, but I've never used it, and I think it's a little funky. There are a bunch of other platforms that are used for tech support. Log Me In is rather universal. GoToMeeting is one. Join Me, Ring Central, Google Hangouts. Anybody use Google Hangouts?
I use Google Hangouts just to make phone calls.
Yeah, okay. I've not used it. And then there's TeamViewer, which is probably one of the oldest ones that I was shown.
I use TeamViewer once in a while.
Yeah, I don't think those are fast enough to use with a meter. And I think they're kind of overwhelmed by seeing a video of the person on the other side. Anyhow, these are examples of things that I've experimented with and what my conclusions have been. Does anyone here actually use a meter?
I use it.
You use it, yeah. Has anyone had or is in the prospect of getting sessions from somebody over the internet? George,
I haven't been doing any auditing for quite some time, and I want to get back into it.
mm-hmm.
I'm looking for a good auditor.
Okay. I noticed that I don't think anybody here is actually delivering sessions. there comes a point in your processing where you start to cognite that the case, your case, is not you. It's not a what we would call first dynamic issue. What you end up handling in session is crap from other people. You see, which is another way of saying other people's crap. This is certainly true on, say, the OT levels, like OT3, which is a very crude way, very crude way of dealing with other beings in your space. But it does address that, and so when you're doing that, you really need to understand that you're dealing with others. In other words, there's a communication cycle involved. You're asking questions, you're getting resolutions, you're trying to get them to do something like back off, or maybe get yourself to where you're not being influenced by it.
Hank, this
Yeah.
is all done solo, not over the internet.
That is right. Well, it's not always done solo, George.
Well, okay, so the guy's a wimp, and he pays big money to have somebody like Mary Friedman run him through OT3 procedure day after day after day after day, and he's willing to do that.
Yeah.
Fuck
Boy,
that.
that's a really, I would agree with you, but that's a very glum concept of the possibilities. Somebody gets.
I am really up to here with the
Yeah.
way people feel very free with upper level materials. The point is the confidentiality of them is because there are nuggets of intense charge that people can bump into, not resolve, and it drives their life from evermore.
Okay, I've heard that. I've certainly heard that.
I've seen it over and over and over again.
Where
I've
people
seen people get into something intense, and the next thing you know, they've messed up with their family. Their members have gone to court and got restraining orders.
Whoa.
It's just really bad stuff.
Yeah.
I'm happy that nobody in your circle has gone crazy like that.
Well,
I have seen it too much.
In 50 years,
50 years.
50 years, the only time I've seen somebody hurt by a session is when there was something malicious perpetrated. I've never seen somebody accidentally get it. I've seen people get into more than they can handle, in which case they just kind of back out or go to sleep, or they become uncooperative, and you're doing the wrong thing, and you back off. And if you're adept, you can save the session. If you're not adept, you lose them as a client. But they don't go. They don't go crazy. I have seen people abused. I have seen a meter used for interrogating a person. I have seen, per policy, people ask questions that are meant to drive them crazy. But I have not, there's a certain amount of street smarts there. I don't work with bridge stuff. I don't work with the OT3 stuff. I don't work with that. But if a person comes in and says, I hear a voice that keeps telling me blah 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 to sell everything and move to Las Vegas, I say, how often do you hear that? Do you hear it right now? I'd like to talk to it. Let's talk to it. Okay,
Right.
how long have you been with George? You know,
Hi.
and
What are
and
you doing? How
yeah,
did that all start? Talking to the being. Oh,
yes.
move to the beginning of the incident when that started. Now
Mm.
scan through
It,
again, talking to the being.
now, wait a minute. Wait a
But
minute.
there's yeah, but
Wait a minute. Wait a minute. There is an implication there that the problem with anybody's case is rooted in a traumatic incident. That's the Dianetic theory. I
I
talk
didn't
about.
say that.
No,
I
but
just said, how did it all start?
how did it all
How
start?
did you start doing this? That you started doing this, The
Yeah.
doing this, I don't go for identity. I don't go for what you got. I go for what is you doing? What are you doing? You're talking to this person, okay? So, so
So what's the
what are you
problem?
doing? I'm talking to them. I'm giving them advice. Okay, how did that, not when, how did that start? Now
What's the
you're
problem?
auditing this being's case.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily traumatic. You're just asking, how did it start?
Yeah. So
Tell me about the beginning of all this.
I got that. So what's the problem?
That the problem is that I see people assume that we're talking about incident two beings or their XYZ beings or any number of
Who assumes
abnormalities. They could be just a demon circuit from DMSMH
who
that
assumes that?
resolves just like that.
Who assumes that unless they've been indoctrinated in this crap? I've seen people that you talk about channeling and they start gibbering like an orangutan. They think that it's the most horrible thing, it's going to kill them. I've worked extensively with channels. I know a lot about it. I can recommend books about it, at least one book, and it's just people communicating. The experiment that we did 2 weeks ago with a deck of cards, where I just held up the deck and asked people, "What card am I looking at?" You were here, David,
No,
and right?
no, I wasn't here.
I thought you were. And
No.
Tom got it right away, just like that. And I expected him to get it.
I used to do
Now,
that
now
in high school, but I can't do
some
it now.
now some people see that and they get bent out of shape. Why should they get bent out of shape? Well, they were told that they should get bent out of shape. Some people get bent out of shape from seeing the meter during a session, but only ones that do this are Scientologists who have been told that they should go crazy from seeing the meter.
That is such an important point right there. There's a lot of that. So, those are implants. Those are implants. What you said, Hank.
Well,
Those programs. I mean, they're being told that.
maybe an implant implies
That's an implant.
physical duress or torture. Just believing something that's stupid is not necessarily an implant. You know, somebody tells you, all black people are bad, and you believe it because the entire culture around you goes along with that, and you come out of there believing that. It's not an implant. It's just this miseducation. It can be disastrous, but it's not an implant. See, if it's an implant, it's actually easier to fix because you run the incident, take the charge off the incident, and suddenly the person will be smart. It's harder than that to fix stupid. Stupid, stupid, stupid is hard to fix. You know, you can't fix it by just doing anything. Also, there's this other thing having to do with the Dianetic theory. A person has a boo-boo. I have a thing here, okay, and this is because of an incident. And you to talk to them about it, and you realize that this thing is a solution to all kinds of problems. It helps them to evade work. It helps them to have an excuse. It helps them to do this stuff. And he's finding an incident. He's actually pulling up incidents out of the past to justify having this problem. And you
So
can
we
run them.
call that a surface facsimile.
That's right. And you can
what?
run those. You can run those incidents.
What do
Yes,
you
you
call it?
can.
What
You
kind
can
of
run them and run them and run them and run them, and you'll still have this thing, and you'll be bitching about it and blaming it on somebody.
does that read on the meter?
What?
A false case? Does that read on the meter? What you're just saying, like run, and the thing is still there. Does that run? Does that show on the meter?
You ask a different question. You ask a different question about it.
If there's charge on it, you know, a person comes in and they've got a knee problem and they've been diagnosed by a doctor that tells them that they need a knee implant, and you have them look at their knee and you talk to them about it, and if it's going to have charge on it, I mean, they're not lying about it. It's not like somebody sent them there to fool you, and they've got charge on it, and you can ask a question like, is that bad knee a solution to a problem?
Oh yeah. Okay.
And if that reads, that's what's read. You got to find out what it read on.
Peter.
Yeah, I'm collecting disability.
There was an article in Free Spirit that I remembered very clearly. I got it in my book. Peter, somebody wrote a good article on that in Free Spirit.
Okay, I'm trying to remember who that would have been. Peter Shepard? I don't know any.
Yep, I think so.
I don't remember the article. If you could find it and email it to me, or email me the name of it or what issue it was in.
When I get off later on, maybe tomorrow or the after, when I pull out my books, I just moved and everything's in boxes and bags.
Yeah, we know that well. So I know that people get very upset about processes that will hurt people. Scientologists are very much into this because this stuff has to be secret. It has to remain secret. Follow the money.
Oh yeah.
One of the things that I work a lot with, not intentionally, but you know, everybody's a little crazy, and people have issues with multiple personalities, and they that's basically multiple viewpoints working out of their body, and this is not such a big deal. We have the tools to reconcile that, but if they go to a psychologist, they get a label. They're schizophrenic, or they're bipolar. Okay, and the solution to that, of course, is drugs, expensive drugs. And you talk to a psychologist at a party or somebody who works with these people, and you tell them what you do, and they get aghast. What credentials do you have for that? How dare you mess with that? This is dangerous.
Oh,
You
yeah,
could push them into a psychotic break.
been there, done that. Yeah, had that done.
Yeah. So why? What's going on there? Well, first of all, they've been indoctrinated a certain way. Second, you're threatening their income. It's almost as bad as claiming you have a cure for cancer.
Yeah.
You do that and see what happens.
Yeah.
They'll come and raid your office and take away your computers at the point of a gun, because you are messing with stuff that belongs to them.
Yeah, it's a business plan.
Yeah. Like this. What was that movie that we saw the other night about Africa? What was it called?
Pharma.
Huh?
Big Pharma.
But what was the movie called?
Constant Gardener.
Constant Gardener. Yeah, you might want to think about seeing that. Where is it? Here it is. Yeah, Constant Gardener. Highly recommend it.
Constant Gardener.
What was it on Netflix?
Yeah, Netflix.
Netflix. Yeah.
Several years ago with Ralph Fiennes and somebody else.
Yeah. Very powerful movie.
Yeah.
Very, very powerful movie. And And that was not even about cancer or schizophrenia. That was about tuberculosis, a cure for tuberculosis.
In Africa.
Yeah, in Africa. Incredible visuals. Anyhow, so does anyone have any questions at this point?
I had one a little while ago. I forgot what it was.
That to happen. George, you have any questions or comments?
I have comments. I think that there are processes that are a little bit more removed from standard Scientology that are very effective and will work over the internet without the precision of did that read, how big the read was, counting divisions down, and so on, that we learned in model session. And I think that there's been problems with transferring model session into the internet. You've been talking over some of your solutions of them, and that's meritorious. That's very good. That's very good. I'd been looking for something that was easier to apply, a simpler thing to get people up to a certain point where they could go solo.
Yeah. Paul, are you still there?
Yes, I'm still here.
Yeah. Do you have any questions or anything to add?
No questions.
Well, you have such a profound scan of experience. I'd love to hear more from you.
CV.
Hmm?
CV.
No, just learning from the group.
Oh, okay. Something I'd like to say, listening to everyone, there is in our culture, our mutual culture, a great deal of interest in processes. People are always looking to see if there's a new process, and processes are being rewritten, and people are fascinated with the idea of the L10 being secret and the secret processes, and even people who are not in that tradition, like Bob Ross. Bob Ross was always calling me and wanting to try out a process on me.
Yeah.
I mean, he wanted nothing better, more than to help people, and he would write clever processes. I actually don't use processes. There's one that I give to students, and I use it myself. What do we call it? The communication process.
The killer process.
The killer process. Yeah. You might have seen if you you might have downloaded it. I think I attached it to some of the promotional emails as a bonus. What would get the person to talk about something and ask them, what would you like to tell me about that, and what ideas have you had about that, and so forth and so on. It's is there a place? I could publish a link to it. I don't know how to get it to you right now. I don't have it. I'm sure I have it up on the website, tucked away somewhere in the archives. Actually,
Hank,
just yeah.
Do you use? You said you don't use process. I like that
Generally
catches my attention. Do you just do it off the cuff as required? You just know what the case needs and you ask the question?
Well, let me back up a little bit. Yes and no. If you've read my book, there's a certain idea that I've derived of what goes wrong with a person's mind. There are basically only 4 kinds of thought that screw a person up or create physical stress, insofar as thoughts can create stress. There are only four kinds of thoughts, and you'll recognize them as being very close to rudiments, but not altogether. But there are
I
four
remember
things.
reading it, but I forgot what it was. That was years ago.
Well, one is upsets.
Yeah,
Most people are walking around pissed off with someone or something. And we could use the word ARC break, but that comes with a package, you know, and so I like to just use the word upsets. The other is quandaries. Most people have goals or intentions or desires and simultaneously have other desires that preclude them, conflict with them. So that it becomes a stalemate and nothing happens. And I mean, you can relate this to stuff from Hubbard, but you have to be careful. You have to empty the cup, because if you have to relate everything to something that Hubbard wrote, you're not going to learn it as I've expressed it.
exactly.
It's just like somebody who's been very deeply into Sufism, and I tell them all of these things that they very much appreciate, but they have to relate everything to something that Muhammad said, or something that Rumi said, or something that
Same with Jesus. Same with Jesus.
yeah, they
Same
have to
thing.
relate it. They have to relate it to the Bible. So you tell them something, and they quote you something out of the Bible, and we call that not emptying the cup. And there's a Sufi story about that I'm not going to go into now. We don't need to do that now, do we?
No, we don't need to do that.
Okay. But when you come to listen to a teacher, you don't sit there as he's telling you his stuff. You don't sit there asking him to reconcile it with what your previous teacher said. Because in the Middle East, if you do that, they'll say, "Thank you very much. The session is over. The lesson is over. Go home. Find yourself another teacher," because it's considered very, very rude to do that, and you're considered to be kind of hopeless. So when you're learning something new, it should be taken on as new. Of course, you have to reconcile it yourself with what you've learned before, but not as you're learning the new form. So the third thing is, well, we know them as withholds. It's a kind of a picture that is formed of a perpetration that you've committed, and you're trying to keep it secret. Okay? And the fourth thing is a feeling of fear, which is generally, not always, but is generally the result of a traumatic incident, something that must never happen again, physically or emotionally. Most people are walking around with these four things trying to function. And it can drive them crazy, or they can be high functioning. It just makes them miserable, and eventually it gives them cancer. So if you know this, and you know the anatomy of each of those four things, you know what questions to ask. And it becomes a matter of being intensely curious about the other person. And most people can't do this work because they're too self-absorbed. They're not curious about, why does the person have that weird habit? You know, why do you get into a relationship and always do something that turns the other person off so much that they leave, and then you feel bad about it? Why are you curious about this? You know, and if you're not curious about it because it's too re-stimulating to yourself, or it upsets you, or lights up your own pictures or your own case, you can't do this work. All you can do is have somebody process you. You see, you have to have the kind of curiosity that you had when you were a little 4-year-old kid or 3-year-old kid that walked up to some old woman relative and asked, Aunt Sylvia, why do you have a mustache? You see, what happens when a kid does that? They get admonished, they get beaten, so they'll never do it again, because it embarrasses everybody. But you have to have that kind of curiosity. If you have that kind of curiosity, and you know the components, the anatomy of an upset, you know the anatomy of a quandary, intention, counterintention, solutions to a problem. You have an intention and counterintention. We call this a problem. And most people deal with problems by solving them. And solve them, how do they solve them? Well, there's some behavior that's intended to solve it. Of course, if the behavior worked, they wouldn't have the problem. So the behavior doesn't work. So the behavior becomes just a behavior is kind of inappropriate. And now they've got the beginning of another problem. So their behavior that was meant to solve a problem creates another problem, you see. And if you know this, and you know this stuff about withholds, what happens when a person has a withhold? Well, they're hoping that they've got something they're thinking, they're hoping that nobody can see it. And how do you think someone like that responds to this demonstration with a deck of cards? It's frightening to them. Because it means that they have no privacy, right? And they have no secrets. And the guy's cheating on his wife and stealing from his boss. But he presents himself well. He knows how to wear a suit, and maybe he's in politics. Somebody introduce, here's my wife, Norma. She's a psychic, and she reads minds. And the guy he's out of there so fast. he created an unsafe environment for him. So there's that, and then there's the fear, which is caused by, why is the person afraid? I won't get in that boat. I'd never get in a boat. Well, if you put them on a meter and talk about getting in a boat, the needle will rise. It will move to the left. So, well, tell me about getting in a boat. I don't know. I'm not interested. I had no interest at all. No interest. Fear, So take a look. Did something happen with a boat? And hopefully you get this little reed, and it continues to rise again. That little reed is them glimpsing the picture. You've started to bleed the picture just a little bit. And if you can get, that right there, that when I, now you've put them on a scan and they can't help but be glimpsing this. And you say, what's that? That right there. Yeah, what's that? Well, this is weird, but I mean, I get a picture of a big ship. Hit an iceberg or got hit with a torpedo or something, and they decided never again to get on a ship. But they forgot all that. All that happens is a picture comes up. It's not a moving picture. It's like an icon, the little icon on a video. It's just an icon. It doesn't move. It takes very little energy. But when it comes up, the person gets scared, which you're supposed to do. If you click on that, it opens up into a whole thing with Vikings and Second World War and all kinds of stuff. It becomes a huge picture. And it's an incident. You run that incident, and hopefully they'll get in the canoe now. So that's how that works. So it comes down to knowing what question to ask, and having some language facility. I mean, you have to ask it in such a way that you're not stumbling. And that's it. And the only other thing that you need to know about to run sessions on people is to know that we share each other's thoughts. And the difference between someone with a body, okay, and someone without a body is highly overrated. So if you get an origination, it doesn't really matter if it's a person with a body or not. It really doesn't. Could be his father told him this thing and he's stuck on it, or it could be his great-great-great-grandfather, some ancestor that told him this thing and he's stuck on it. Where's the ancestor? The ancestor's right here. No, say hello. Okay. The handling is not much different. And it has a lot to do with a person's tendency or inclination to misown stuff. You know, some people, you walk into a room, it's very empathic. You walk into a room and suddenly you get a headache. You didn't have a headache before. Well, the normal thing would be to go and take an Excedrin. But if you walk into a room and you were feeling great and suddenly you have a headache, you look around the room. Maybe it's a party. And you try to figure out whose headache is this. And you look at one person and they turn around and look at you. And suddenly your headache goes away. Well, you know whose headache it was now, right? And you handled your headache and it could be finished right there. Or you can go up and ask the person, how's your headache? You know, ask them if they want help with it. You do whatever you want. So if you have all of these perspectives, what process do you need? You see? And you have to be intensely curious because you're going to screw up. You're going to make some people upset. You're going to ask some people questions they're not ready to ask. You're going to ask people to look at things they're not quite ready to look at. You're going to get in situations where you remind them of somebody. You can fix all of these things, you know, but you have to have that incentive. It's like a person that wants to play concert violin. You're going to make a lot of mistakes, waste a lot of time, you know. Take information from other people. Half of them don't know what they're talking about, but you stick with it and you become good at it. And the interesting thing is you rise above your own case, so to speak. When you handle something for someone else, the gains are vicarious.
Oh yeah, I've experienced that. Hank, I want to ask you a question. There's a couple there that used to be Ray and Pam. What's their last name? Ray and Pam.
Kemp.
Yeah, Kemp.
Never heard of them.
No. They on a video there. They're talking at David Mayo's place there, and one of them said that they can clear an average case in 35 hours. Do you know how that's done? Do you know how that's done? George thinks it's a
okay.
joke.
The first thing I ask, define clear.
You ask Ray Kemp, or I think it was Ray Kemp. Who was it?
Ray Kemp is not here right now, so I can't ask him.
Well, it doesn't matter if his body is here or not.
But plenty of people ask me, "Are you clear?" And I say, "Compared to what?"
Okay, book one, clear of all engrams, is traumatic incidents this lifetime.
Well, that's a whole package. That's the whole package of beliefs. And one is that the present is a result of the past, which I learned a long time ago is not the result of the past. That blows that all to hell. So you could say, what the hell are you talking about? But we could have that discussion. The other thing is the idea that the only thing that goes wrong with anybody is that there was a traumatic incident. Even OT3 is a traumatic incident. You have beings around you that are distracting to you, making impressions on you or influencing you. It's a traumatic incident. Find the traumatic incident. This is very, very simplistic. I hate to say it's total bullshit because traumatic incidents can create these situations, but there's other stuff. There's other stuff, and to talk to somebody that's deeply invested in Dianetics and Scientology, this is heresy. This is like telling a drug salesman that there are other things other than drugs that help people. It's just they won't hear of it. They can't hear of it. And David Mayo, to the best of my knowledge, is very much wrapped up in the Hubbard paradigm.
He died now, you know.
No, I didn't know.
Yeah, he died
No.
last year, last fall.
No, I didn't. I would like to have had a one-to-one conversation with him.
Me too.
I actually did have a conversation with him at one point. He had moved to where was it?
Texas. He's died in Texas.
Okay, he was in one of the islands, Costa Rica or something. And I was asking him to write something for the Free Spirit, and he never got back to me with it. But you know, I was not a very social person when I was exposed to this stuff, and I had what you call hidden standards, and had David Mayo or even John McMaster's been the first clears that I ever spoke to, had they been my first influence, I wouldn't have stayed with this. I would have drifted off in a couple of days.
The idea that John McMaster was the first clear, that's all bullshit. That's just Hubbard needed something to validate his Scientology.
Well, what do you, again, come back to how do you define clear?
I don't like that question because to me, I have experienced long periods of clear state that was quite amazing.
But by the definition, by the marketing definition, long states of clear doesn't mean anything. It's permanent, because if you have a state of clear, is a state of clear. You see, what they're talking about is an absolute, right? A clear is absolutely clear. Clear is not a little bit clear, or clear on one subject. It's clear. And Hubbard did say something else that pertains, that was actually quite accurate. Absolutes are unobtainable.
Yeah.
So now he's selling this absolute, you know, he could have done better than that. I mean, it's, the thinking there is embarrassing when you get.
Hubbard was all over the dial, all over the map with his stuff, all the way through.
That's right.
Contradicted himself from every side, on everything he said.
That's right. But he had a lot of ambition, and because of that ambition, he got the stuff out to people like me and you.
That's right. Give him credit for that.
And the main thing in his case that nobody ever could get on top of, and he wouldn't let them get on top of it, was this inordinate fear of vulnerability. In the Michael system, that would be called arrogance, which he certainly was very arrogant. And a person who has that fear of vulnerability is actually easily manipulated by flattery, which he's famous for, being vulnerable to that. He was always so suspicious of betrayal, and yet he routinely found people to work with who betrayed him. He never, this is actually a case thing, but with that particular characteristic, the only way to fix it is to come to somebody and say, there's something wrong with me personally, where I am so afraid of being hurt, and it's out of proportion with my power. I have so much personal power, and I know all of this stuff, and yet I feel afraid of being hurt. It's like a greedy person can have, you know, a person who's poor and greedy, you excuse that. But if a person is a billionaire, and they never feel that they have enough, they're always worried about losing even a little bit of money. They count their pennies at a restaurant when they're paying the bill. This is called greed. And it's an inordinate fear of lack. It's an unreasonable fear of lack. Well, a person who is very, very, very powerful, who can stand up in front of thousands of people and sway them, but who is so afraid of being attacked that if he met somebody in a passageway, he would duck into a room. There's something wrong with that, and that illness pervaded the entire organization that he created. And if you understand that, if you really understand that, it's easy to forgive him. But where else have you heard this? You know? So, any other questions?
It's now 5 o'clock.
Oi, yeah,
Yeah.
too long. Okay,
Overrun.
overrun. Okay, who feels overrun?
I do.
David? Okay, when did you feel really good about the Okay. Okay, well, thank you very much for joining me. I would like to ask one thing while I've got you here. We had a lot of people sign up, at least 10 people signing up. And I sent out 2 hours before a reminder, and yet people don't show up. Anybody have an idea why that is, or what we could do to
It happens all the time. It happens in meetup groups. Like I opened up a meetup group a while back, and close, I don't know, 30, 40 people will sign up, and one comes to the meeting.
Really?
Oh yeah. I don't know. People are just interested. They want to be there. I don't know. Yeah, I don't have an explanation.
Any ideas on that, George?
They're darn earthlings. You can't trust them with a mile.
How about you, Tom? Any idea why people will actually go to the trouble of signing up and then at the last minute not show? Yeah. Paul, you have any comments on that?
Wait,
I was muted.
Oh yeah.
Well, could be something came up, or I don't know.
Yeah.
Sometimes something comes up.
Paul, you have any ideas on that?
Individual attention to the intention.
Individual attention
To the intention.
Can you explain?
Yes, if they intend to be here, they're here.
Why would they go to the trouble to sign up?
No more attention.
You mean signing up was as much whammy as they could give it?
Evidently.
Okay. Well, thank you for your insight. And we will hopefully have another one in 2 weeks. And I really thank you for being here and appreciate it greatly. Each
I look
person.
forward.
Thank you.
You know, I want to make a comment on the.
Whoops, overrun.
Yeah, I was more joking than not. I'm just getting tired. Anyways, I think 10 people in this group would be unworkable. I don't think. I mean.
Yeah, I think this is a nice number of people myself.
Yeah, half a dozen is max.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It wouldn't work after that.
I have a question that Hank and I have been wondering about, and that is why no one has has written something and then put it up on our website. Is it hard? Is it hard to put it on our website? Is it impossible? Do we need help, or what? Why?
Well, what's the problem, Norma?
Well, we have 2 sites. One is the Free Spirit Journal, which is open. It's an open page, and anyone can go on it. And I would like to post articles on it other than just my name. We also have the group page, the Free Spirit Journal community portal group, and I'd like to post things on that, whatever is appropriate. And I have not had anybody submit an article for either page. And I'm wondering if anybody has tried to submit an article and they never got acknowledged, or I never got back to them, or didn't get approved, or something like that.
I,
Oh,
did, I
Hank,
didn't
I'll
know
fix
about
you
it.
up.
Say that again?
I'll fix you up.
Yeah, I'm interested in reading George's stuff. Yeah.
Oh, wonderful. We're interested in publishing it. Great.
Yeah. So if you would just email me an article or articles, I'll take a look at it and suggest where it should be, and I can help to post it myself. I don't mind doing that. I would actually like to see people able to do it themselves.
But so what?
But so yeah, so what? Yeah, if you send well, okay, I'd like to see your articles. So please send some my way, and we'll figure where to post them. Okay,
David,
I am about to end the meeting.
David.
There we go. Thank you all for being here.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye
Bye.
bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.